3 men walked deep into the Pennsylvania woods on a Friday afternoon. Only 2 of them remember coming out. The third man, Marcus, walked out under his own power. He was breathing, he was talking, but the 2 men who drove him home will quietly tell you that whatever came out wearing Marcus's face was no longer their friend. In November 2019, Joel, Danny, and Marcus drove to a remote cabin inside the Allegheny National Forest. They were experienced outdoorsmen. They had made this exact trip to this exact stretch of woods for 6 years straight. They knew the terrain and they knew the routine. We assume that sticking to a familiar routine and traveling in a pack keeps us safe in the wilderness. But to a highly intelligent predator, a predictable routine is exactly what makes you an easy target. The group arrived around 9 p.m., and Danny immediately noticed the noise, or rather, the lack of it. There were no crickets, no wind in the branches, and no owls. The temperature had dropped, but a November forest is never completely silent. That Friday night, it felt like a vacuum. Joel built a fire. Marcus sat closest to it, staring out the window into the pitch-black exterior. Around 11 p.m., he asked if it felt like the tree line was creeping closer to the cabin than it had been an hour ago. Neither of them laughed. When an entire ecosystem goes dead silent, it is a biological reaction. The local wildlife recognized that a massive, unrecognized apex predator had just moved into the territory, and their survival depended on absolute stillness. Before dawn on Saturday, they suited up and split across their standard hunting ground. Joel went north to the ridge. Danny took the eastern creek. Marcus headed west, into the thickest part of the forest where the canopy blocks the sky. They carried cheap 2-way radios to check in every hour. At 7:45 a.m., Danny's radio crackled. Instead of Marcus reporting his position, Danny heard 43 seconds of slow, heavy, rhythmic breathing pressed directly against the microphone before the line went dead. 30 minutes later, a single deep rifle shot echoed from Marcus's direction, then absolute silence. Then 2 more shots fired in rapid, panicked succession. Joel and Danny dropped their gear and sprinted west. They found Marcus perfectly still in a small dirt clearing, his rifle aimed at the ground. He said he shot 3 times at a tall, upright creature watching from the tree line. When he fired, the creature laughed and then calmly walked backward into the dark without ever breaking eye contact. They searched the tree line and found 0 tracks and no blood. But as they turned to leave the clearing, Danny looked down at Marcus's feet. He counted exactly 4 spent shell casings in the dirt. Marcus insisted he only fired 3. A 4th shell casing next to a man who fired 3 shots implies a presence that understands human activity and is willing to manufacture them. This manipulation suggests the entity wasn't just observing Marcus, it was testing how much it could alter his reality before he noticed. Marcus spent Saturdays staring blankly out the cabin window, entirely detached from the conversation. That evening, Joel took a flashlight to the porch and swept the tree line. Floating perfectly still in the darkness, 8 feet off the ground, were 2 pale, reflective eyes. This diagram maps the cabin and trail camera 60 yards away. At 11:03 p.m., it captured a silhouette. At 1:58 a.m., the entity leaned into the lens. 2 minutes later, it was outside the window, humming. Covering 60 yards of dense brush and silence in under 2 minutes requires immense physical power. The entity was isolating the group, studying their facial reactions on the porch, and testing its ability to replicate human vocalizations outside their window. Despite the terrifying night, Sunday morning arrived with Marcus speaking in a completely calm, reasonable voice. He logically explained away the eyes as a bear and the sounds as a bird, insisting on returning to his clearing for one final hunt. Joel and Danny let him go. At 11:23 a.m., a sound of absolute mind-breaking terror echoed from the west. They sprinted to the clearing and found a physically impossible scene. Marcus was kneeling in the dirt, completely uninjured. Surrounding him was a perfect circle of deeply pressed, 18-inch barefoot prints. There was no trail entering the circle and no trail leaving it. Marcus looked up with a dead, hollow expression. He told Joel and Danny that the creature had stepped out of the trees, and it was wearing his exact face. Before vanishing, It whispered that it was going to miss him. The encounter in the clearing was the final stage of a process that began with the humming and the trail camera footage. Every interaction served to refine the entity's mimicry until it was ready to step into its victim's life. They packed their gear in silence and drove out Monday morning. As Danny checked the passenger side mirror, saw a tall, unnaturally still figure standing at the cabin's edge, watching their truck leave. Joel Hartman has never hunted again, and he spends his nights monitoring the security cameras he installed around his home. Danny Cruz locked the trail camera footage in a heavy safe, submitting his account to document exactly what they experienced. Marcus relocated 6 weeks later. Before leaving, he texted Danny that the creature wasn't finished with him, and that he finally understood why it learned his face. 31 days later, his landlord found his apartment empty, with his car and all belongings left behind. The Allegheny National Forest covers over 500,000 acres. Hunters walk into those tree lines every November. The wilderness harbors predators that go beyond physical violence. They study us until they can walk out of the woods and take our lives away from us.